Kelly here. Welcome to our online service this morning at Oma Community Church. We hope that this service brings you life, love, and hope to the heart of your world.
is our God. Say with me, how great is our God, and all will see how great is our God.
Hey, so thanks so much for being with us today as part of the online digital experience here at the Community Church in Omagh. I want to read to you today from an incredible chapter in the book of John, the New Testament book, one of the four Gospels. We've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So I'm going to read chapter 6. The chapter starts off talking about Jesus feeding 5,000 people with nothing essentially but a packed lunch. He's got 5 loaves, 2 fish, performs this incredible miracle, and he goes on and he feeds 5,000 people. Then the next thing that John highlights to us is Jesus walking on water. And then also included in the chapter as well is the first of the many I am statements that Jesus makes about himself, where Jesus says that I am the bread of life. And then if we get to the end of the chapter, we will see some people decide that after hearing what Jesus has taught and seeing what Jesus has done and hearing what he has said, that they actually make the decision that they no longer want to continue on their journey with him. And they turn back and they go to where they come from and they desert Jesus. So Matthew chapter 6 verses 60 through to 70, it says this. It says, on hearing it, in other words, the teachings that Jesus has just given about being the bread of life, many of his disciples said, this is a hard teaching. Who can accept it? Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, does this offend you? What if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. And the words I have spoken to you are spirit and they are life. Jesus goes on and he says this. Yet there are some of you who do not believe. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and who would betray him. But he went on to say, this is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled him. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. You do not want to leave too, do you? Jesus asked the 12. And Simon Peter answered him and he said this, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. So I absolutely love the heart of this story, the context of this story, the substance of this story, and the teaching in this story. Here we find Jesus. He's been on a journey. He has had a number of people who have decided that they want to follow him, and they reach a cross point in their lives where Jesus is challenging them to recognize him for who he is, what's available to us, to them, through him, and how he is the substance for everything that we need in life. How he sustains us, how he gives us life, how he breathes life into us, and how he releases life into our very spirits, because he is God himself. And there's a challenge set, there's a standard set, there's an expectation set here by Jesus. And I love how Peter responds. Peter's response is just so incredibly beautiful, where he said, Lord, where would we go? It's almost like Peter is standing before Jesus, and Jesus is saying, "Are you going to leave me too?" And Peter looks at him, I would imagine, with almost like a dull face, like, "Are you having a laugh? Like, are you serious? You know that I know who you are, and yet you're asking me, am I going to go? How could I? Where would I go without you? Because I need everything that you are, and I need everything that you have." And I think for us as disciples of Jesus Christ, I think this recognition and this understanding that we've got to actually ask ourselves is, do we believe that Jesus is everything that we need and can provide everything that we need and lead us into everything that we require for life on purpose, with purpose, and for a purpose? You see, the thing about Peter is that Peter has done the journey with Jesus. And it's easy for him to submit. It's easy for him to surrender. It's easy for him to follow because he recognizes Jesus for who he is. We're talking about the same Peter who had that eye-to-eye moment, who had that physical contact, that physical engagement with the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the great I am, the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, who was and is to come, who looked at Jesus when Jesus said, "Who do the people say I am?" This is the same Simon Peter who goes, "You're the Christ. You're the Messiah. You're the Son of God." Why was it easier for Peter to make the commitment? It was easier for Peter to make the commitment because he recognized Jesus for who he is. I want to ask you today, who is Jesus to you? I want to ask you today, what is Jesus to you? I want to ask you today, what has Jesus given you, and what has Jesus done for you? What has Jesus shown you, and what has Jesus provided for you that would allow you to look at him and say, it doesn't matter what's going on around me, it doesn't matter where other people are going, Jesus, where you go, I will go. Jesus, where you call, I will follow. Jesus, where you are, I will be. It's a big challenge for us today, church. It's a big challenge for us today, disciples of Jesus Christ. It's a big challenge for us as followers of Jesus Christ. Is he enough? Is Jesus enough? Is his lordship, is his sovereignty, is his goodness, is his mercy, is his compassion, is all of him, who he is he enough? Because when we recognize him as enough, we can place our trust in him, we can place our hope in him, we can place our past in him, we can place our present in him, we can place our future in him in such a way that we can follow him with confidence. The same confidence that would allow Peter to say, "Jesus, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we believe and know that you are the Holy One of God." I wonder where you're at today, friend. I wonder where you're at today, follower. I wonder where you're at today, disciple. And I gotta ask you the question again. Check your heart. Who is Jesus to you today? Do you believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God? Do you believe that Jesus Christ left his throne to come to earth, to die on the cross that we deserve, so that we can have the forgiveness of sins, who went to the tomb, who was raised from the dead, and now sits, after ascending to heaven, sits at the right hand of the Father, interceding on our behalf? Do you believe that right now Jesus Christ is sitting in heaven talking to the Father about you, reminding the Father, interceding on our behalf of how we are loved, how we are forgiven, how we are being sanctified, and how we have been given new life and our new creations and being led into heavenly places? It's the mark of a disciple. This is who we are. This is what we believe in. Jesus Christ is who we follow. You see, it's easy to follow when you trust who you're following. But let me tell you this, it's also easy to submit when you recognize authority. I remember my old pastor, Andrew McCourt. He's in Bayside in the States. Great church, doing great things in their community. I remember long time ago when I started my walk with God, Andrew was talking about the recognition of authority. And he told this great illustration. He said, if a police officer, here in Northern Ireland, we've got the Police Service of Northern Ireland. If a police officer in his uniform would go out and stand in the middle of the road, put his hand up to get you to stop your car as you're moving, you would recognize the uniform. Maybe you'd see a gun, maybe you'd see a Land Rover or a police car, but you'd recognize the authority that was stopping you. You'd recognize the authority that was asking you to submit. You'd recognize the authority that you would have to come under in that moment. But what would happen if the same police officer would just randomly, out of the blue, just decide to stand someday out in the middle of the road to stop the traffic? Because you wouldn't recognize his authority, the chances of you stopping in the way that you would have stopped if you saw his uniform would be very different. You see, when we don't recognize authority, we find it more difficult to submit. There's a little interaction that takes place just earlier on in John chapter 6, in verses 41 and 42. And so Jesus has declared that he is the bread of life. He has declared that he is coming from the Father and that he is to do the will of the Father, and that, everybody who believes in him will have eternal life. And he's making all of these incredible statements, and then all of a sudden, some people who don't recognize Jesus for who he is and don't see his authority say this. John writes it like this, and he says, at this, the Jews began to grumble around him because he said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. And these people, they go on and say, so they said, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, I come down from heaven? And these are the people that decided to turn their back. These are the people who decided that they were no longer going to continue on their journey with Jesus, to Jesus in eternity. Why? Because they couldn't recognize his authority. They couldn't recognize Jesus for who he was. They couldn't see his sovereignty, and they couldn't submit. You see, friend, it is easy to submit when you recognize authority, and it becomes easier to submit to Jesus when we recognize his authority. I love how the Apostle Paul writes it in Colossians. He says, he's talking about Jesus Christ in Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through to 21. He is the image of the invisible God. Jesus Christ is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, and all things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body of the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, not moved from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant. This is the sovereignty of God, the supremacy of Christ, the image of the invisible God. You see, friend, it is easy to submit when you recognize authority. It is easy to submit to Jesus when we recognize his supremacy. That doesn't mean that the things that we're asked to do will be easy. That doesn't mean that the things that we will be led into won't require sacrifice. That doesn't mean that the things that we are being led into won't require discipline. That doesn't mean that the things that we are being led into won't require patience or perseverance. But if our hope is in Jesus Christ, if our faith is in Jesus Christ, if we recognize his sovereignty, if we recognize his authority, then we can submit to the things that he is calling us into. We can commit to the things that he is calling us into. We can let go of the things that he is calling us to let go of. We can pick up the things that he is asking us to pick up, and we can do the things in his name, for his glory, to extend his kingdom in his name, when we recognize his sovereignty. He's either God or he's not. He's either sovereign or he's not. He's either the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the great I am, the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end, who was and is to come, or he is not. You got to make up your mind. You got to make the decision. And when you trust and when you follow, you can be led into great things. But the trusting and the following comes from the recognition that who we submit to is God himself. And I think as we find ourselves in this season, we actually need a big view of God. We got to increase our capacity to believe for God. We got to increase our capacity to believe the things of God. We got to increase our capacity to wait on the things of God and believe that God will deliver. Here's the thing. If we're going to continue in steadfast love, following Jesus and surrendering to Jesus on a daily basis, we need to increase our capacity to trust Jesus. Our capacity to trust Jesus is developed through our recognition of his authority. And our recognition of his authority is developed through the revelation of who he is. And the revelation of who he is developed in our time spent with him. I'm going to read that again for you. If we are going to continue in steadfast love, following Jesus and surrendering to Jesus on a daily basis, we need to increase our capacity to trust him. Our capacity to trust him is developed through our recognition of his authority. Our recognition of his authority is developed through the revelation of who he is, and the revelation of who he is developed in our time spent with him. Let me read you these words from Psalm 31. Incredible psalm talking about following God. It says this, Psalm 31. In you, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me. Come quickly to my rescue. Be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name, lead and guide me. Free me from the trap that is set for me, for you are my refuge. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Redeem me, O Lord, the God of truth. Stay with me, this is brilliant. I hate those who cling to worthless idols. I trust in the Lord. I will be glad and rejoice in your love. For you saw my affliction, and you knew the anguish of my soul. Verse 8, Psalm 31. You have not handed me over to the enemy, but have set my feet in a spacious place. Be merciful to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and my body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish, and my years by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. Because of all my enemies, I am the utter contempt of my neighbours. I am the dread to my friends, and those who see me on the street flee from me. I am forgotten by them as though I were dead. I have become like broken pottery, for I hear the slander of many. There is terror on every side. They conspire against me and plot to take my life. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My time are in your hands. Deliver me from my enemies and from those who pursue me. Let your face shine on your servant. Save me in your unfailing love. Let me not be put to shame, O Lord, for I have cried out to you. But let the wicked be put to shame and lie silent in the grave. Let their lying lips be silenced, for pride and contempt they speak arrogantly against the righteous. How great is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, which you have bestowed in the sight of the men, on those who take refuge in you. In the shelter of your presence you hide them from the intrigues of men. In your dwelling you keep them safe from accusing tongues. Praise be to the Lord, for he showed his wonderful love to me. When I was in a besieged city, in my alarm I said, I am cut off from your sight. You heard my cry for mercy when I called to you for help. Love the Lord, all his saints. The Lord the Lord preserves, there we go. The Lord preserves the faithful. Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in. I love how we read here in Psalm 31 verse 5 where the psalmist is literally saying, into your hands I commit my spirit. Believe it or not, these were the dying words of Jesus. These are also words that are very often used by many people who are breathing their last breath. But I really feel like these are the words of the disciples and as disciples for us today, both in life and in death. Committing ourselves to the care of Jesus Christ, regardless of circumstance. You see, no matter what's going on around us, we can't lose sight of the joy set before us. The world is in chaos. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Some people don't know whether they're going to be returning to employment. Some people's mental health is being affected. Salaries are being affected. Families are being impacted. Our children may go back to school next month. They may not. We live in uncertainty, but the steadfast love of the Lord never fails. So disciples, followers of Jesus Christ, let's not lose sight of the joy set before us in the midst of the chaos that surrounds us. Let's commit to developing habits. Let's commit to developing our relationship with Jesus Christ so that we can increase our capacity to trust him, increase our capacity to submit to him so that we can live the life that Jesus died for us to have. In his name, amen. Hey, stay safe, be blessed, see you soon.
If you'd like to know more about becoming a Christian or more information about OCC, then text or email us at the contact info below. If you have a praise report, prayer request, a pastoral or physical need, then again, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you.